and welcome to this Newsmobile special Ambassadors Round Table from Washington, D.C. I am Saurabh Shukla. It's a Newsmobile exclusive, and we have some of the finest diplomats, people who have steered this relationship, joining us today. I have with me Ambassador Tim Romer, former U.S. Ambassador to India, who has also served as a congressman before. Welcome to Newsmobile, Ambassador.
Thank you. Good to see you again.
Good to see you. We have Ambassador Arun Singh, former Indian ambassador to the U.S. Welcome, Ambassador.
Thanks, Saurabh.
And then we have Ambassador Atul Keshav, someone who really steered this relationship in the thick of the COVID pandemic. Welcome to Newsmobile, Atul.
Thank you so much, Saurabh. Good to be here.
Okay. So let's set the ball rolling. The big visit of Prime Minister of India, Narendra Modi, to the US. It's a state visit that's going to start from June 21st, and we are here to talk about it. Coming to you, Ambassador Romer, first, what do you think is the significance of the state visit? Everyone in Washington is talking about the state visit, the state dinner, and the private dinner that the president is hosting for the Indian Prime Minister.
Well, certainly, I'm delighted to be with my friends on your TV show, and very excited about the visit by Prime Minister Modi coming up to Washington, D.C., to America this coming week. As you know, you're a Washington expert. We don't do many state dinners. I'm reminded of the state dinner that President Obama gave to Prime Minister Singh. And the people of India, his very first dinner was for India, highlighting and showcasing how important our strategic partnership is with India. And now, more than 10 years later, we are doing a state dinner for Mr. Modi. I can't tell you when I've ever seen one like this before. The fireworks, the celebration, the excitement. Mr. Modi will join a select few of leaders to address our joint session of the House and the Senate. He joins such names as Winston Churchill and Nelson Mandela, as people have done it more than once. He will have a very intimate dinner with the president and the first lady. He will also have the state dinner, and that is the hottest ticket in town. I thought I got great tickets when I got a chance to go to see Taylor Swift in concert a couple of weeks ago with my daughters. This is a hotter ticket than that. And then the next day, I will be joining Prime Minister Modi at the State Department in the Benjamin Franklin Room, where the Vice President of the United States will honor him with a luncheon. And then the Kennedy Center opens up, and the Indian diaspora will join us in celebrating and listening to Mr. Modi there. So these are all big shows, but with substance. And we don't do these for just anybody. We only do these for our most important and intimate and trusted partners.
Ambassador Singh, how hard are these to negotiate? You've been an Indian ambassador here, and I know how hard it is. So from the standpoint of Indian diplomacy, how hard this would have been to negotiate?
I don't think it would have been particularly hard because, if you look at who have been the other state visitors of the Biden administration, it was the French president, and then you had the South Korean president. And so if in terms of the priorities that the US has set for itself, India would certainly be there. And I think last time the Prime Minister was in the US was in September 2021. And that was not really a full-fledged bilateral visit. It was for the Quad summit. And then, of course, he had a meeting with President Biden. So I think a visit from India was very much on the cards. And I think it is a signal from the US that they decided to make it an official state visit. And these are things that the US leadership has to decide. As President Obama had decided in 2009 to invite Prime Minister Manmohan Singh as the first state visitor of the Obama administration. But once that decision is taken, then you get into the works, whether there should be an intimate informal dinner, what are the other events. But I think it's less of negotiating, but more of a signal from the US about the value they attach to this visit and to the Prime Minister, and then how they want to signal that. But I think the fact that he has been invited to address the joint session of the Congress is a reflection of the broad bipartisan support in the US among Republicans and Democrats for the India relationship. This invitation there to also speak during the state visit.
That's great. Ambassador Kashyap, what do you think is the most significant part of this visit, according to you? You've been someone who's now steering USIBC as well. So what do you think is the biggest component of this visit, according to you?
Saurabh, I think that there's great maturity in how we approach each other now. All of us recall an era or past eras where we focused on the past in the US-India relationship. And now I feel we have finally reached a moment where we can focus aggressively on the future. We clearly have a strategic, economic, and technological convergence that is going to be important for both of our countries and both of our free societies. And we have to sustain that convergence over the entire 21st century. We have to ensure that ours is a global operating system of open markets and open societies. And so to watch the real policy nitty-gritty work that's been unfolding between the two governments is a real joy, because I remember an era where we mostly talked about all of the many things that we disagreed about. And now we are starting to talk about the many, many things that we do agree on. We have almost complete strategic congruity of view on the Indo-Pacific, and that is through the Quad and our very warm relations with Japan and Australia. It is also clear that we have growing economic convergence. If we have taken one lesson from the pandemic, it is that we need to have secure and stable and resilient supply chains for our people. And so when you look at the project of work, and USIBC is very happy to help with this with both governments, it is focused on deep tech and future tech, semiconductors, electronics manufacturing, healthcare for our people, outer space and cybersecurity, telecom security, quantum computing and artificial intelligence. This is really a future and forward frame for the state visit. And I find that very encouraging and very positive, and it sets an extremely ambitious agenda for both governments and societies.
Ambassador Robert, coming to you now, Atul mentioned about Indo-Pacific, and one of the key strands of cooperation that we, both India and the US, have is to make sure that Indo-Pacific is free, freedom of navigation. And there they see China's bullying tactics at times. Secretary Blinken is in China. How much of the China factor will play out in this visit? And what do you see is the future of this relationship being driven by the China factor?
Well, we all of us have mentioned the term strategic convergence many times. And what that means to your viewers is that increasingly in the US-India relationship, we tend to see the world in a very similar fashion for our economic interests, for our technology interests, for our defense interests, for our interests of helping out the poor and the hungry in Africa, where India has been a leader over the years in food security issues, climate change. We see the world increasingly like-minded, and that is a very positive thing to build trust and to build on the relationship when you are talking about such sensitive things as intelligence sharing, terrorism, cooperation in the Indo-Pacific on defense matters. So building that trust over the years to the degree where we can even disagree with India on some issues. And, let's all be honest and frank with each other. I'm sure President Biden and Mr. Modi are going to have some private conversations about the Ukraine war, about China, about human rights that only good friends can have and only trusted partners can have. With respect to China, nobody knows and has experienced China's aggression more than India has. Back a couple years ago with the border war where India lost 20 soldiers, the United States continues to share valuable intelligence with India about China's growth on that border, what they're doing what they're building, what their intentions are, not only there, but in the Indo-Pacific. So I think you're going to see this visit coming up where the United States and India are showing the future of where we will work more and more together on artificial intelligence, on wireless communications, on semiconductors. That's the future of the world. And you're going to see the United States is now, and I think India sees this strategically the same way we do, they are also cutting back with their technological cooperation with China. We're not going to contain China. We have no intention of that. We don't want to decouple our economy from China. They're our largest trading partner. But on technology, we are going to cooperate with our friends more. We are going to de-risk our supply chains. And we are going to friendshore with countries like China, countries like India, who we trust, and not countries like China, who we do not trust on the technology development and security in the future. So China is a very, very important factor. Neither India nor the United States want conflict with China. We just sent our secretary there to de-escalate tension, to try to open up our defense channels again, have our defense secretaries talk to one another. China is still refusing to do that. We will keep trying because we, like India, see the world in the same way. A secure world, a peaceful world, a prosperous world where both our countries and other countries can succeed.
Right. Ambassador Singh, one of the big issues that have been raised by some of the critics who have been trying to pan this visit, saying that the dependability factor, the trust factor is missing in this partnership. What do you have to say to that? Do you think that there is trust and dependability in this relationship, or this is more of two democracies coming together for just a common good?
So Saurav, as you rightly indicated, because of past history, there are a lot of people who raise this question, whether US should be seen as a dependable partner. And that's because in the past, because after the Second World War, the US led military alliances and Pakistan was part of the military alliances. So the US was more supportive of Pakistan. Or in the 1971 conflict, US came down completely on the side of Pakistan and sent the 7th Fleet in the Bay of Bengal as a way of pressurizing India. So there are memories in India related to that. But the fact remains that if you look at subsequent developments, when we had the Kargil conflict with Pakistan in 1999, the US came down on the side of India and clearly asking Pakistan to go back to their side of the line of control. And I think that was the first time over a long period that the US had taken a firm position on India-Pakistan issues that favored India. So that was one. Second, if you look at the Civil Nuclear Cooperation Agreement that the United States did with India, and the main objective why the US did that was because that was one way of enabling higher level technology releases for India from the US to enable more cooperation in defense and other high-level civilian technologies. But because US did the Civil Nuclear Cooperation Agreement with India, India came out of the nuclear apartheid. And India could then do cooperation also with France, also with Russia, with Kazakhstan on civil nuclear materials and technology, which we would not have been able to do. And no other country in the world could have changed international norms and regulations to enable India to have that except the United States. And the United States did that for India. And then US worked with India to also facilitate India's entry in multilateral export control regimes, like the MTCR, Wassenaar arrangement, the Australia Group. So when I talk to my friends in the US, officials in the policy community, they say that we've taken so many steps which nobody else could have done to enable India to get, to meet its own interests much better. Therefore, the questions that you raised in the past are not relevant anymore. But the fact remains that there are certain memories in India. And, in defense, we have three other major partners: France, Israel, and Russia. And at moments of crisis, they have stepped in to be helpful. And so there's a memory in India. Now, the US argues that of late, in moments of crisis, we've also stepped in to be helpful, as Ambassador Romer mentioned, in the context of the Galwan crisis. sharing of intelligence, sharing of winter supplies, leasing of drones. So the US argument is that, what memories you have of the past do not really define the relationship today. And, the Prime Minister, when he was speaking to the Congress last time in 2016, he said that we are ready to move away from the hesitations of history. And so as I see it, the Indian government is clearly moving in a direction of consolidating relations with the US. But in the wider policy community in India, there are still these questions that keep cropping up. But I think it's more just a inertia memory from the past that is driving this.
Yeah. Atul, you've been steering, in some ways, you've been a champion of this defense partnership between our two countries, and defense is an integral part of a relationship, as Ambassador Singh mentioned. How much of a trust factor creeping in do you see in this relationship, and what do you see as the future of our partnership in the defense arena?
Well, first, I want to appreciate and applaud Arunji for what he said. It is quite clear what he said, and I think he offers a very important perspective. On defense, look, if you believe the media stories that are coming out about the potential engine deal, it is clear that the United States may be going in a direction where it has not gone with almost anybody else on this planet. And that it is clear that American policymakers see great value in seeing the Indian defense capability grow that much more. If the Indian multi-role combat aircraft really does have these excellent American engines at its heart, it is going to be great for India's national defense for decades to come. It is also going to radically transform the collaboration between the United States and India in defense, and I think greatly amplify it. Look, my view is simply that the US and India ought to have the greatest and most robust defense production capability on earth so that free countries everywhere can have the deterrent needs that they must have in order to ensure that they can have prosperous and secure and stable borders and free people. So defense collaboration is really important. This engine deal potentially could be a game changer. I think, again, if we want to focus on the past, that's kind of unprofitable and frankly denies us the opportunity to focus on the really important things going forward. Getting the defense collaboration right is going to be great for America, great for India, and great for the world. I think it's going to go beyond just the engine deal. There may be other deals announced, and that these are going to be good for your people and ours.
That's great. Ambassador Romer, if you were to define, a lot of our young viewers will be watching us, 3 big takeaways from this relationship that will guide the future of Indo-US partnership, what would these 3 areas be?
Well, first of all, I think that there is no other relationship in the world defined by people-to-people common values, core interests, exchanges, the diaspora, like the United States and India. Whether I was visiting a particular village in India, I know that the Russian ambassador had never been there, the Chinese ambassador had never been there, certainly, and the United States was there to show our common understanding and interests in a graduation ceremony. Similarly, in the United States, we have Indian Americans running for high office. Well, one of my good friends, Raja Krishnamurthy from Illinois, is now one of the most important members of Congress. He serves on the Select Committee on China and is helping designate new policy in a bipartisan way. So those people-to-people ties, first of all, are so unusual, unique, and important to build that trust that we have so that we can get through and negotiate disagreements. Or as Ambassador Singh was saying, our bureaucracies sometimes have some hesitations on issues because of history, and we need to talk those through. Secondly, technology. This is a very exciting area for the U.S.-India relationship. When you read carefully through the AUKUS agreement between Australia, the UK, and the U.S., the nuclear submarine issue gets a lot of attention, but it's actually the second part of that agreement on AI, quantum computing, computer chips, undersea cables, space, all those things are going to define our security and our commerce and economic activity in the future. That is where there is so much hope and promise between the United States and India, and less cooperation between the world and China, quite frankly. And then thirdly, I would say one of the most important areas is collaboration on climate change and working together with India and hopefully China, where they have very specific interests in doing this. The United States wants to be inclusive around the world. We don't want to isolate China. India doesn't want to do that. We want to work with them in certain areas. And climate change, reducing fentanyl coming into the United States and around the world, those kind of collaborative areas are very positive for the health of the world.
Ambassador Singh, what would your three takeaways from this visit, which will define the future of the partnership?
First I'd focus, as Ambassador Romer did, on the critical and emerging technologies. And many have pointed out correctly that this is the next big thing that is happening in the relationship after the Civil Nuclear Cooperation Agreement. Because after that agreement, even though the US did not supply nuclear-related equipment, but it opened up a whole host of possibilities of higher-level technology partnership. And in defense, till 2008, we had hardly bought any supplies from the US. Now we've contracted to buy about $20 billion worth of supplies. We are talking of a defense technology partnership. And you are seeing the reports about $3 billion worth of drones to be bought. So more and more is happening. But I think the decision to launch this initiative on critical and emerging technologies, it is going to take the technology partnership to another level. And ISET has become really the organizing framework for the bilateral economic, technology, and defense partnership. If the jet engine proposal goes through, it is because the ISET framework is in place. And in fact, I remember I was at a major event recently where one of the Indian startups in defense said that their proposal for a technical assistance agreement with a US major went through with record clearance speed because of this framework of this partnership for ISET. So I think that has become a very enabling framework, and we should watch how that evolves. I think the second important thing is, which I'm sure will be deepened through this visit and further conversation, we are learning also to live with differences. We will have differences on issues. Geographically, we are located differently. Historical experience is different. So the way we've handled the Russia-Ukraine issue, where we have certain differences from the US position, but we have supported sovereignty and territorial integrity of Ukraine. Prime Minister told President Putin that today is not an era of war. And the US Secretary of State has said that we understand India's compulsions. India's relationship with Russia developed at a time when the US was not willing to be that kind of a partner. Or the national security advisor, that with India, we're playing the long game. So I think we will learn far better to manage our differences, and that will be a very important development. And I think the third thing that is happening more and more is that two societies are coming together, as there is an increasing number of people of Indian origin in the US. The vice president is a person of Indian origin. And you look at CEOs of companies, Google, Microsoft, IBM, Adobe, Starbucks. They are Indian origin CEOs in critical places. And the large number of people who are turning up to welcome the Prime Minister. So at the societal level, we are coming closer. And I think that will also consolidate the partnership.
Ambassador Kashyap, I'm glad Ambassador Singh mentioned that, and you've been a champion of the Indian diaspora, also doing a lot for the relationship. But there is a concern sometimes that a lot of Indian students are coming to the US, a diaspora links are there, a lot of Indian tech professionals are here, but when it comes to consular issues, especially, H-1B, green cards, EB-1s, there is a challenge. How much of a progress do you think a visit like this can do to allay the fears of many that US is not really concerned about Indian professionals being here?
Well, I think, Saurabh, you should ask the United States government that question. And I think from the perspective of the US Chamber of Commerce, we believe passionately in the movement of skilled and talent in order to help companies on both sides, India and America, achieve great things for our people. American and Indian companies have been deeply invested in the prosperity of both of our countries for many years. And so that movement of skilled and talented professionals is really important. And governments need to put in place the necessary procedures to be able to facilitate that kind of movement for our greater happiness and well-being. But Saurabh, I also think that it's important that we look at the trade issue in and of itself. You know, U.S. and India only have about $191 billion in trade in goods and services per year. The U.S. has an echelon of $500 billion or more in trade every year with Mexico, Canada, the European Union, and China. And I think it's unacceptable that we haven't yet hit that echelon with the U.S. and India. I encourage both governments to be ambitious, to come up with the kinds of agreements that would put in place a structure that would give even greater confidence for both of our private sectors to invest and trade with each other even more. If the U.S. and India are trading at $500 billion a year and more, that means that India is probably a $10 trillion economy. It's good for India, it's good for America, it's good for the world. So I think we need to be impatient, we need to be ambitious. We can't just rest on our laurels. We have to really be aggressive about hitting that trade target. And then I just want to echo what Ambassador Singh said about ISET. We were pleased to launch it in January with the two governments. We're also launching an outgrowth of ISET, a subordinate element of it, which is called Indus X, which we're launching day after tomorrow at the U.S. Chamber, which is going to focus on defense collaboration, defense startups, private sector partnerships and deals between the U.S. and India. These are the growth areas. And we have to keep in mind that our trade and investment is still underpowered and under potential, and we really need to get that right.
Thank you. Thank you all for a stimulating discussion today, and I hope this will only spur the decision makers into taking this relationship forward and bring in some new momentum. Thanks all for watching. This was a Newsmobile special here from Washington, D.C., and stay tuned for our continuous coverage on this big Indo-US summit here from Washington, D.C. Thanks for watching.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.